Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and those who understand the fruitless futility of our fallacious faith and our phantasmal future. It is I, Aleister Crowley III, Deputy of Common Sense, and your Monarch of Meaninglessness, as well as your immoral illusionist. Today's topics are meaning and morality. Most of you will not enjoy this video at all, but you just might learn a few things. Stranger things have occurred before. Without further ado, why don't we begin? Welcome to the Endless Waltz. May I have this dance?
There is nothing wrong with your browser. Do not attempt to refresh the page. We are now controlling all that you see and hear. We control the horizontal and the vertical. We can delude you with 1,000 videos or expand one single frame to crystal clarity and beyond. We can shape your vision to anything our imagination can design. We shall control all that you perceive until we see fit to release you. You are about to experience the depths of depravity that reach from the folly of human pursuits to the Deputy of Common Sense. Please stand by.
As you may have gathered from my videos, I am a nihilist. Yes, I am indeed a nihilist. I believe that everything which exists, which has ever existed, and which will exist in the future, is meaningless. I believe the choices we make are irrelevant to the grand order of the universe. I believe that the idea of an inherent purpose outside of our own perception is foolish and arrogant, while you probably believe that that statement itself is pointless, because if there's no meaning in life, then why strive to achieve anything? The truth is that most of you are incapable of properly grasping the concept. This is not your fault. Your brains simply aren't wired for it. In truth, nihilism is a state that only the truly logical can achieve. It is the knowledge and acceptance of life without meaning or purpose. It is the knowledge of just how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of the universe. It is the acknowledgement and rejection of so-called human exceptionalism. It is true understanding of our own mortality, not just as individual beings, but as a species. It is the comprehension that no matter what we do, what we say, or what actions we might take to prevent it, the cold reality is that one day we will all cease to exist. It is the ultimate state of surrender. You are surrendering your free will. You are giving up on your ability to change things. You are sacrificing your own hubristic belief in meaning, purpose, free will, life after death, God, and emotional/mental attachment to any ideology whatsoever. Nihilism is the ultimate state of neutrality. The truth is that purpose is merely an illusion. It is the hubristic delusion of our own importance. But the truth always wins out in the end. And the truth is that everything in our universe is devoid of purpose. Every single atom exists without purpose, and always has. So why is it that when these atoms are grouped together as a human being, that some kind of magical purpose appears out of nothing? How is that different than the idea that atheists believe the universe was created out of nothing? How can the religious argue against the very same concept which they rely on to continue their beliefs? No, I'm afraid that simply isn't logical. That isn't logical at all. Every subatomic particle only moves in accordance with time and the natural laws that govern our universe. Just as a clock ticks without meaning, just as a computer whirs without purpose, so too do the gears of the clock and the circuits of the computer bow to the laws of the universe. With this universal truth, the one and only universal truth, we can understand the illogical nature of free will. Free will is a truly ridiculous concept. We are only experiencing what we feel is control over our lives, even though what we think is free will is merely an illusion constructed by a complex matrix of neurons inside our brains. There is no reality, only our perception. In the end, everything is only a series of subatomic particles, some of which are arranged into a human being. But you know what? The same subatomic particles which make up every cell, molecule, and atom in our bodies are present throughout the rest of the universe. The building blocks which our biological structures are built out of also build everything else in existence. Everything that exists is merely stardust in a slightly different shape and size. Everything, the cows which we eat, the mice which we use for experiments, the trees which we fell, the gems which we wear upon our bodies, the water in our oceans, the soil beneath our feet. All of this is made of the same materials. Why should our arrangement of particles mean more than theirs? What makes us so special? Depending on where we live, and of course where we die, we may end up being one of the things I previously mentioned in under a century. Our existence as flesh and bone is far more temporary than most of us imagine, as is our idea that water will remain water, soil will remain soil, gems will remain gems, and so on. Just because something is in one state of existence doesn't mean that it will remain there. Eventually, it will be in a completely different one. For example, a rock. We might end up as a rock one day. One type of rock in particular, a fossil. One day, far in the distant future, we may become fossils. Yes, like the dinosaurs we eagerly viewed in museums when we were children. One day, it might be us in the museum. Assuming we are not reduced to ash by nuclear war, crushed to pieces by falling debris, incinerated in the maw of a volcano, or that our bones do not lay in an area that is not conducive to fossilization. And remember, just because we become fossils doesn't mean that anyone will ever find us, nor does it guarantee that there will be anyone to look in the first place. The odds of the latter are not in our favor, and the odds of the former are astronomical. We will almost certainly be forgotten. In a few generations, all that will remain of us is government data. In a few centuries, we will only exist as a family tree. And in a few millennia, even that will fade. It will be as if we never existed. Of course, exceptions will exist. They always do. The extremely influential, of course. But let me ask you, how many of you know the name Howard Taft? James Milton? John Tyler? Franklin Pierce? What about Warren G. Harding? Or Chester A. Arthur? Or Millard Fillmore? Or Zachary Taylor? Do you know who any of these men were? Unless you're an American history buff, probably not. Allow me to enlighten you. They were U.S. presidents. Yes, all of them. Every single one. They led our country, yet only the historical scholars and the history geeks know their names. And if they, the men who attained the highest office of American government, if they are forgotten in only 2 centuries, then what possible chance do we have of being remembered? I would estimate our chances at nearly zero. The truth is that purpose itself is an exercise in futility. Purpose itself is pointless because particles do not exist with purpose. They simply exist. Now, I'm sure that some of you would argue that if something is pointless, then why would it exist in the first place? Well, pointless things already do exist. Many pointless things exist. They can achieve things, but that is not why they exist. They simply do. A screwdriver can tighten a screw, but that doesn't imply an inherent meaning to its existence. If you were to ask a screwdriver what its purpose is, then you would be met with silence, because a screwdriver cannot answer. It cannot even think. In fact, everything else on the planet is unable to think as we do. We are the only ones capable of understanding the concept of meaning. If you were to ask a cat, a dog, or even a chimpanzee what they believed the meaning of life was, they would fail to comprehend the question, even were they capable of understanding our words and responding to them. The truth is that meaning is a human construct. It is an illusion of the mind. It does not exist outside of our own heads. Meaning is an illusion. There is no inherent meaning behind our existence. Our lives are merely a flash of lightning within this universe. The universe began over 13 billion years ago. What possible effect could our paltry, insignificant 100 years do to affect it? We do not live in a comic book. We don't have reality-warping supervillains. There are no universe-destroying weapons, nor are there unspeakable Lovecraftian monstrosities that threaten to devour the cosmos. This is reality, and as far as we are able to ascertain, we are alone here, utterly and terrifyingly alone. The Earth is naught but a grain of sand in the vast universal desert. What possible effect could those who exist within that grain of sand have upon the rest of the desert? The truth is that the universe will go on as it did before, despite how we might attempt to change it. The universe is completely indifferent to our existence. We were not put here for a reason. There is no greater purpose that made us what we are. We were created by a biological gambling machine. Our evolution was generated by a series of increasingly lucky accidents. That's what we are. That's all we are. That's all we ever were. And that's all we'll ever be. We are, were, and always will be an accident. So then why do we think our lives have any meaning? How do our actions matter in the face of this universal truth? How could our lives have any impact upon the greater universe? How could we finite beings that have existed for a maximum of 100 years possibly make an impact on a universe that has existed for 13 billion? We don't, we can't, and we are foolish to believe either. Our belief in some kind of inherent meaning is an exercise in futility. It is a display of arrogance, hubris, moral grandstanding, and an undeserved sense of our own exceptionalism so great that it cannot be properly quantified. It is the ultimate delusion of grandeur. While plenty of you might be willing to live a lie, I, on the other hand, accept my status as a lowly speck and choose to embrace it with open arms. I relinquish the illusion of human exceptionalism. I am not exceptional. I am not superior. I'm just an ordinary human. That's all I've ever been. Just a lowly human who couldn't fight his own destiny without help from a drug. In the grand scheme of the universe, I don't matter. Neither do you. And the sooner that we all accept the truth, the happier we'll be. After all, when we're not worrying about how to change our lives, the lives of those around us, and the world at large, it leaves us time to enjoy ourselves. The time we spend trying to change the world would be better spent purely enjoying it. Without all this idealistic nonsense cluttering up our brains, we can decide what it is that we actually desire, and then we can seize it. If we try, we may discover that there is purpose in the purposeless. There is meaning in the meaninglessness. We may find that by accepting that everything is meaningless, we have found the only real meaning that exists. After all, what's the point of living if we're so busy worrying about what legacy we might leave upon the world that we forget to truly appreciate the world we're trying to change? Just let go. Live your life. Don't worry about changing the world. Either you will or you won't. That's all there is to it. Just turn off your mental GPS and enjoy the ride. After all, the journey is more important than the destination, right? Alrighty then, that was the meaning portion of the video. Now it's time for the morality portion. I've said a lot of horrible things on my channel, some in the form of comedy, and others with perfect sincerity. I've called people horrible names. I've insinuated that some of the goons I respond to are in fact the product of incest. I've made sexist jokes, racist jokes, transphobic jokes, homophobic jokes, fatphobic jokes. I've delighted in ripping apart the arguments of the weak-minded. I've mercilessly mocked a disabled woman. I've championed the idea that authority must be questioned and then disobeyed. I've repeatedly driven home the point that our extinction is inevitable. I've mocked religion and SJWs with merciless efficiency, and in all honesty, I have no regrets about any of it. At this point, you may be sitting in your chair and wondering what kind of inhuman monster could possibly write these things, and then speak them for all the world to hear, while having complete confidence in the accuracy of his own beliefs. Well, I'll try to answer your question, but my answer will probably horrify you. Keep in mind, I am not a moral relativist. I am a moral nihilist. I believe that given the right circumstances, anything can be justified as a moral action. For example, I don't think that shooting an unarmed person in the back is always morally wrong. If that person is a threat to the world, to society, or even to my family, I would gladly shoot him or her myself. Also, if one of my children grew up to be a monster like Stalin, or even a simple murderer or rapist, I would not only kill him or her, I would feel that it was my responsibility to end the life I created in order to save others. I would do the same to my sister and my parents. I would gladly kill the president if it meant avoiding a nightmare like 1984 or World War III. It would break my heart to do any of these things, but sometimes we have to give up the things we cherish the most in order to ensure that others do not suffer. On the subject of abortion, every single child that I conceive will be aborted. Not because I'm a heartless monster, quite the contrary in fact. I'm being kind. My life has been a nightmare that none of you could even hope to comprehend. Every single horrifying experience which I've gone through was caused by my genetics. If I can do anything to avoid passing those genes on to another person, then I owe it to myself and to them to take advantage of that method. Earlier, I mentioned rape. When you remove emotional attachment, even that can be justified with moral nihilism. There are only two situations where I could see that rape would be justified. Number one, as punishment for those, male or female, who commit the most awful of crimes. Number two, as a method of repopulating the planet should that ever become necessary. Why don't we move on to theft? I believe that if it's a choice of stealing or death, you should choose stealing. And while I personally would not do so myself, I completely understand the desire to break into a McMansion and make off with a bunch of goodies. I don't believe in copyright at all when it comes to art. I believe that art should not be something you can make a profit from. And I say that as an artist. For my final example, let me include something horrible. Let me speak about mass slaughter. Let me be perfectly clear. I would never want to be in the position where I'd have to make such a decision. Not because I don't believe it could be justified, but because I do not have faith in my own ability to make the right decision when I needed to. I'm too rash and I'm too quick to anger. However, I can definitely envision a situation where such a decision would need to be made. There are too many people on this planet. Quite a few scientists agree with that statement. Studies back them up. I believe that a limit should be placed upon the number of children that can be had. I believe that some of those who do not contribute to society might have to be eliminated so as to ensure the survival of our species. The existence of climate change is largely irrelevant to this idea. Whether you believe in climate change or not, one fact is indisputable. We have a finite amount of land on this planet, and we have a finite amount of resources. This is an extinction level problem. And I'm sure most of you know perfectly well that solving a problem early is generally better than waiting until right before the deadline. We have a deadline. That deadline will come when we run out of resources. And that will happen sooner than you might think. We are all living on borrowed time. Overpopulation is the deadliest threat which mankind has ever faced. Starvation, poverty, climate change, pollution, the economic crisis, all of these problems are rooted in the problem of overpopulation. The earth contains too many living things. The environment cannot sustain the population. Of course you get starvation. Of course you get poverty. In theory, the way supply and demand works is that people need things, and their need creates demand for those things. So other people create a supply of the things to meet that demand, and the supplier makes a profit. When the supply is oversaturated, the demand lowers. And when that happens, companies lay off workers, they cut spending, and they create cheaper products in order to compensate for the loss in revenue. That is the basic principle behind capitalism. That's how it works. In theory. In practice, it creates disaster. Mankind is so greedy that instead of relying on the existing supply to create demand naturally, big businesses manufacture the demand, just as they manufacture their products. Have you ever wondered why your favorite console is sold out months before it even hits the market? Think about it. These are billion-dollar corporations. Don't you think it's even a little fishy that these companies neglected to build enough units to compensate for the demand? Doesn't that seem slightly off to you? Well, the reason that reeks of dishonesty and malfeasance is because these corporations are being dishonest. They know perfectly well that they've created an insufficient number of units. They know they'll be sold out months in advance, and they don't care. because they planned this. They planned the whole rotten thing. They intentionally built a number of units lower than the demand, because if they don't, they'll go out of business. Now, this kind of dishonesty wouldn't be so much of a problem if it only applied to consoles, smartphones, jewelry, and other luxury items. But it doesn't. It applies to food as well. Yes, you heard me. I didn't stutter. It applies to your food. You can get 2 cheeseburgers for $2 at McDonald's, but a salad costs $5. A 32-ounce bag of Tyson brand chicken nuggets is $5, but a box of the healthier Bell & Evans chicken nuggets is $7. In addition, the Bell & Evans box is far smaller than the Tyson bag. You'd have to buy at least 2 and probably even 3 boxes of Bell & Evans to get the same quantity of food that you would get from Tyson. That would put you at $21 minus tax. Yes, I think the gears in your head are starting to work. I think you're beginning to understand. The healthy food is 75% more expensive than the horrible garbage when you account for the quantity of food. And people somehow still wonder why America has an obesity epidemic. Poor people can't afford healthy food. The system forces them to buy food that will end up killing them. This cannot go on. Something simply must be done. Restrictions on childbearing and the elimination of unnecessary drains on resources would go a long way towards fixing this problem. If we could eliminate the scarcity of resources, then capitalism would become an outdated concept, and the lives of ordinary people would improve. Socialism would leave the realm of the impossible, and it would cross over into reality. Mankind would have no choice but to grow up and put away childish things. The world would change. The shackles on our wrists would be broken, and we'd soar to greater heights than we'd ever thought possible. But you don't like this idea. You think that your morality is more important than the survival of our species. You think that my idea carries too high of a price tag. You vehemently oppose this idea, even though it would save our species. You would rather spread from place to place forever. But what happens when you run out of places to go? Well, we all die, that's what. We could expand for a bit longer, but in the end it wouldn't matter. We'd have a little bit more space to live on, but in the end, the specter of overpopulation would come back to haunt us. Eventually, the population will become so large that the Earth is unable to contain it. You know what happens then? Game over, man. The free market is not the answer. Neither is socialism. Nonetheless, we must fix the problem, or we will end up paying the price. If we reach 8 billion people, we all go down the drain. That's the maximum number of human beings the world can sustain at our current rate of consumption. Because of this, I would have no problem Thanosing half the planet, even if that meant that I'd go with them, even if that meant my loved ones would die and I'd live on. My morality is not shaped around what society believes is wrong, nor is it shaped around what is legal or illegal. And it certainly isn't based around what a book of Bronze Age myths considers immoral. If it benefits our species, then I'll gladly do it, or allow it to be done. For me, issues such as gay people having sex or abortion are not only morally justified, they are also important parts of the plan, as are SJWs. Those people are less likely to have children, and that means that the more of them we have, the more our population will be reduced. Less human beings means less resource consumption. That is not up for debate. It is a scientific fact. It is a basic law of nature. When a species runs out of resources, it starves and dies. In the natural world, a species is kept in check by a predator. When the predator disappears, the prey multiplies until it exceeds its environment. That's how every other species on this planet works. The problem is, we have no natural predators except each other. For most of our history, only disease and limited access to travel have hindered our growth. Disease culled our numbers, and lack of easily accessible travel methods limited the expansion of our species. But within the last 300 years, those limitations have been steadily declining. We have eradicated many of the diseases which once killed our young. We have created travel methods that are so simple and easy to access that we scarcely even stop to think about traveling a distance which would have been impossible only a mere 400 years ago. We may have achieved success at eradicating the limits of our environment, but we still remain in the crosshairs of extinction. The sword of Damocles which looms over our heads is not in spite of our advancement, but instead because of it. We are advancing our technologies faster than our societies. Our technological advancement is progressing much too fast for our civilizations to keep up with. We have learned how to destroy our limitations, but we haven't adapted to compensate for our newly acquired freedom. We have spent far too much time figuring out what we can do, and far too little time figuring out whether we should actually do it. This kind of dangerous thinking has created unspeakable horrors such as Zyklon B, Agent Orange, the Gatling gun, sarin gas, ecstasy, fracking, pollution, factory farming, and of course nuclear fission, the catalyst needed to create nuclear weapons. The list of unintentional horrors continues to grow, and it will grow and grow until we delve too greedily and too deep, and so disturb that one bit of knowledge which was better left buried. The bane of humanity will come, and when it does, it will be of our own making. And that is why I believe in the necessity of ideas which are so terrible that they remove those who adopt them from the gene pool. I believe we should actively seek to spread these ideas, because the truth is that only two checks remain upon our progression as a species. Number one, ideas, and number two, extinction. Barring the return of a deadly plague or the destruction of our technology, we have two options. We can limit ourselves, or we can join the ghosts of species past. Frankly, I rather enjoy living, so I prefer to place limitations on our species instead of waiting for nature to do it for us. And this is precisely why I not only advocate, but also encourage the existence of self-destructive ideas. I find the SJWs to be repugnant, but I remain content in the belief that just like the anti-vaxxers and the MGTOWs, they'll write themselves out of the gene pool. And they'll probably manage this without any interference from the rest of the world. The more of them there are, the more will disappear. And while a small number of them do have children, that number is insignificant to the rest of the planet. Having them around is a net gain. True, we may lose some of our rights and freedoms, but honestly, that has happened to other civilizations, and they eventually regained most of those rights and freedoms, if not all of them. However, one massive threat stands in the way of my plan: the people who worship the Abrahamic God. These people breed like rabbits on aphrodisiacs, Together, they produce more children per year than the rest of the world does combined. They also actively seek to increase their numbers as much as humanly possible, and they try their utmost to remove the rights of others to control their own reproduction. I've spoken about cancerous ideas before. Well, this is one of them. Religion is a cancer on society. Quite literally, in fact. Cancer is caused when a cell becomes damaged and cannot be repaired. Cancer begins in a single cell and then spreads throughout the body. A healthy cell receives instructions to die so that the body can replace it with a newer cell that functions better. Cancerous cells lack the components they need to instruct them to stop dividing and die. There are many types of cancer with many different levels of severity. Some are relatively easy to treat, such as breast cancer. Others, such as pancreatic cancer, are so deadly that people turn pale as death when they get the diagnosis. I would say that communism is an ideological breast cancer, whilst religion is a pancreatic cancer. The Abrahamic religions are a deadly ideological cancer that threatens the entire human species. An individual religious person is a damaged cell which has been rendered unable to stop dividing and die off. The Abrahamic religions advocate the massive increase of their population. The line is right there in the Bible. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, and over the birds in the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Genesis 1:28. And that, right there, is the root cause of our overpopulation problem. While countries such as China have made enormous efforts to reduce their populations, America still actively encourages us to have children. The same idea is prevalent in Middle Eastern countries. And the only reason that the cancer has not reached a fatal stage yet there is because they kill each other at an equal or greater rate than they reproduce. If the Middle East were to become peaceful, and Islam were to adapt to modern times, I think that we'd see a massive spike in the Islamic population. Despite its proclivity towards war, terrorism, cruelty, and oppression, Islam remains the fastest growing religion on the planet. When I imagine what would happen if Islam were to grow up, my skin crawls and my blood turns to ice. I would honestly prefer that they continue killing each other, because when they stop, we all die. The desire to pass on both their beliefs and their genes is the deadliest part of the Abrahamic belief system. From that single idea was born an ideological cancer. We are the human body. Religion is the root cause of the cancer. And that man sitting across from you reading his Bible? Yeah, he's a deadly cancer cell. America is riddled with cancer. It has spread to 10 out of our 11 bodily systems. Only the immune system remains to fight off the disease. The scientific community, the atheist community, skeptics, and those who reject religious dogma, they are the American body's immune system. But even these last bastions of sanity have been infected with cancer. Our immune system is failing. Another ideological cancer has been born from where we least expected it, the left. This cancer is feminism and social justice. It has proven extremely effective at spreading through the American body, replicating over and over, taking over all systems, and completely nullifying large portions of our immune system. We are fighting against a two-pronged attack from two deadly forms of cancer, and we are losing. America may well be past the point where treatment is possible. However, that may not matter all that much. Even if America is destroyed, then that is a small price to pay if the human race survives. All civilizations die out anyway. It's inevitable. I see no reason why we are any different. Keep in mind that Rome probably believed it would last forever, at least until it became impossible to ignore the fact that it was dying. Rome was far older than we are, and it didn't see the end coming. And that's because nobody wants to face the idea that they won't last forever. But reality doesn't care. We will not last forever. We will eventually go extinct unless we get off this rock. We do not currently possess the technology we need to get off this rock. We don't have it yet. And I believe it is my responsibility as a human being to give us the time we need to create it, or at the very least prove that we can't. When there is no hope of survival, only then can we give up and die. I apologize if you find all of this completely horrifying. I also apologize if it is too much to bear. But I answered the question of what I base my morality around. My morality is based around the survival of the human species, and I will commit any act, no matter how monstrous, in order to add to the chance of that survival. Maybe I'm a psychopath. Maybe I'm insane. So is the Joker. And you know what? They have a theory about him. In this theory, the Joker knows that he's a fictional character. So he does all those horrible things because that is the role he was given. I have a similar attitude, although not one based on a conscious creator. I believe that our roles in life are based upon what we've experienced. The world is full of monsters, idiots, and those without the foresight to understand what is best for them. Those are the roles they seem destined to play. My role may not be to stop such people, and I am not arrogant enough to believe that I can. My role is to tell stories, in particular, horror stories. My job is to write horror, but I don't write just any horror. All of my horror stories have one thing in common, and that is the ability to defy our fate and the consequences of our complacency. I hope that by showing people the parts of them that they'd rather not acknowledge, they will finally stop ignoring their inner darkness and choose to transform it into light. Maybe this is sheer arrogance. It probably is. After all, George Orwell probably believed the same thing. He probably believed that his book would be a warning to others, and yet we repeated the same mistakes. Maybe history really is an endless waltz. Maybe the 3 beats of war, peace, and revolution will continue until we are all nothing but dust and bone. But if I can increase the probability of our survival, then no matter how small that increase might be, it is my responsibility as a human being to use it. Does that answer your question? Probably. But if it does, I bet you aren't happy about it. Keep these words in your head, for one day they will come back to haunt you. If you think you've imagined your worst possible nightmare, then remember, everything's relative, and everything's eventual. The universe has a proclivity towards punishing us for what we can't imagine. That is why I live by the words, it could always be worse, and it probably will be. Whatever horror you've dreamed up in your head is far from the worst thing that awaits you in the future. I'm afraid it isn't even close. For you moral absolutists, your nightmares have only just begun. Embrace your nightmares. Make friends with them. You'll be seeing them for the rest of your lives. Well, this looks like the end. I hope you enjoyed this exploration into nihilism. But you probably didn't, and regardless, it doesn't matter. nothing matters. The truth is that horrible people are often cast as gallant heroes, while good people live out their days as mere extras. But the worst fate awaits the free thinkers, those who say what they mean and refuse to be burdened with ideological bias, those who refuse to be defined by arbitrary labels or be sorted into meaningless groups, are the ones who will experience the full force of society's wrath. We are cast as the villains. And to be honest, I'm okay with that. Because, as a great man once said, in an evil society, the villain is the hero, because only the villain can speak the truth. These people are monsters who call themselves heroes. That is the role they seem destined to play. So I must play mine, the villain who stops the monsters. I'm the deputy of common sense. I dispense swift justice to those who aren't so swift. Remember, everything is meaningless. Absolute morality is an illusion. Everyone and everything will eventually wink out of existence, and we have to point it all out. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
There's a man called the Doctor. He lives on a cloud in the sky. He can keep the whole world safe.
I can feel it.
He is everything.
The turn of the earth.
The Time Lord has such adventures, but he could never have a life like that.
I'm not a hero.
Because he's lonely.
That's who I am.
You looked inside me and you saw hatred.
I never would.
That's not victory.
I really am just a madman in a box.
To the man without a home.
My entire planet died. My whole family.
Time Lord is so much more. A sum of knowledge, a code, a shared history, a shared suffering.
The lonely god.
900 years.
4.5 billion years.
In the end, you just get tired. Tired of the struggle. Tired of losing everyone that matters to you. Tired of watching everything turn to dust. But I can remember Clara. I can remember it all.
I said I'd protect her.
I brought her here. Look what they did. They killed her.
I've got to do this. I've got to end it.
Amy! I did worse things than you could ever imagine. And when I close my eyes...
You're ashamed.
Amy! And you'll still be gone.
No. Help me.
I can do whatever the hell I like. You've read the stories. You know who I am. I name you!
No more.
You are the destroyer of the worlds!
Help me.
What's wrong with him?
Everybody knows that everybody dies, and nobody knows it like the Doctor. But I do think that all the skies of all the worlds might just turn dark if you ever accept it.
Look how far I went for fear of losing you.
Do you remember my father's land back home? Pastures of red grass, stretching far across the slopes of Mount Perdition. We used to run across those fields all day, calling up at the sky. You don't need to own the universe, just see it. Listen. Listen. Go on then.
If you listen to nothing else, listen to this.
Listen to it.
Two hearts.
Let's find it. You and me.
You and me, just like the old days.
Listen. Would it stop then?
Doctor.
Noise in my head. But it hurts. It hurts. Doctor, the noise. The noise in my head. Doctor. The drumbeat. The rhythm of four. The drumming. Will it stop? Drums. The never-ending drums.
If it's the Time Lords.
The moment is coming. The moment is me. You have to decide.
I've been running faster than I've ever run, and I've been running my whole life.
Watch me run.
Now it's time for me to stop.
I'm still alive. I'm not dead.
The heartbeat of a time lord.
Look at me! No plan, no backup, no weapons worth a damn.
And doesn't that scare you to death?
Make the foundation of this society a man who never would.
You are monsters! That is the role you seem determined to play, so it seems that I must play mine. The man that stops the monsters.
So come on then!
Just to finish off, I'm gonna wipe every last stinking darling out of the sky!
Run!
Moron. I'm the doctor, and I save people.
Just for the hell of it, let me save you.
So if anybody's gonna shut up, it's you!